Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Lee Williams, and you, of course, are watching Outraised Voices. Thank you for being here. If you've been here before, thank you. And if you're a newcomer, I want to say thank you. I feel very blessed that you show up each week to support us. But today on Outraised Voices, we are going to be talking with someone whose work in transformation helps a lot of people. Amy Blake is a trauma specialist, a speaker, and relationship coach, and her mission is to empower people to heal attachment wounds, reclaim their voices, and live connected lives. So through her modalities, and we're going to ask her to explain these, like EMDR, juicy, the flash technique, deep brain reorienting, and voice-centered coaching. We'll talk about that. Amy helps people release trauma from the body. And her work with couples helps them to move from disconnect to intimacy. Now, I believe that most of us disconnect from our true selves, from our bodies, from time to time. And of course, that can be due to so many reasons, including self-protection. But Amy's not only going to talk about what she does, but how she navigated her disconnect and released her own trauma, and how she reclaimed her voice. So everybody, welcome our guest CEO, Amy Blake. And she's going to help us. She's going to talk about transformations and traumas and lots of stuff that most of us experience in our lives and how she navigated it, as I said. So let's start with that. Well, first of all, let me just say this. Amy and I met in 2023 during our transformational leadership ongoing learning. And one of the things we bonded over was Amy is a vocal coach for speakers, and I have been a vocal coach for singers. So that was one of the things we bonded over. But we're going to talk about how voice, using your voice, finding your voice is important, how you can integrate all of these things. So let's start with you, Amy. Let's talk about how your personal journey impacted what you're doing. Take us through your personal journey, if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind at all. It's kind of a big one. So
Well, it's healing because you're a
you can
healer.
guide it if I'm getting too far in the weeds or too far afield. So I grew up in the 1960s and 70s, and I grew up in a family where my parents were born into the Great Depression. And my dad served in the United States Navy in World War II. And there was a lot of trauma and a lot of attachment wounding, which wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a known thing, I don't think, back then. But that's what they brought into their parenting with me and with my brothers. And the fortunate thing for me was I really knew that my parents loved me. It's just that there was the capacity to really do what was necessary wasn't there. And so the lack of attunement, which turns out to be one of the biggest factors that causes problems for people. If you have misattuned parenting, you don't feel seen, heard, valued, understood, you don't get protected. And that was a problem for me, where there was sexual abuse, there was abuse going on for quite a long period of time in my family and in my neighborhood. And that just, the problems that I experienced, like being depressed from age 6, just weren't seen or addressed in a way that was helpful for me.
So at age 6, were you telling your parents about this, and how do they react? Because
It
there's
was
the
not,
language
yeah,
at 6 years
no.
old. Do you have that language to say, hey, this is life is happening to me in this way?
hmm No, I did not share.
Mm,
I
mm.
think, like many kids who get abused, the abuser gives the directive, if you tell, I'll kill you.
Right.
So there was a lot of reasons for staying silent, and I
Hmm.
did, and got very introverted, very angry. I was an angry little kid. And it's so funny. A classmate of mine from kindergarten who lives in Europe now sent me our class picture. And there I am with my my scowling little face, this little indent that was there when I was 6. I mean, it was just like it was just like so much anger in that little body, and so much frustration, and
Trauma and
trauma.
doubt
Yeah,
and self something, self
mhm,
hate, maybe, who even
mhm,
knows? Because
yeah,
what I understand is that children, when they're traumatized at such an early age, just because they keep it inside so much, they grow into these self hate, self doubt, what did I do to
mhm,
cause this? How did I create this situation? The blame, they take on this blame when shame and guilt, which of course they shouldn't.
right. Well, and I think it's a brain thing too, because at a young age, children are pretty self-centered. Like, I'm the center of the universe, and so it must be my fault. And that's actually a very protective thing, because if I believe that if I was just better, if I was more lovable, if people actually cared, then I'd be taken care of. So I must be doing something wrong. So it gives you at least a pathway. I mean, it's wrong. It doesn't work, but in the brain of a little one, it gives a pathway of hope that it could be different, instead of like, oh my God, I'm stuck with these people who don't know what they're doing. I'm screwed. Like that,
Oh.
that's an impossible place to be. And so I think it's part of survival. I mean, it helps the
Mhm,
survival to think, okay, this is my fault. I could do something different.
mhm. So
Yeah.
that's what you felt. Is that what you're saying? That's what you felt, that it was your fault
Mm-hmm.
and you had to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So you developed this sort of, as I call it, scar tissue
Mm-hmm.
around the feeling of being. I'm not abused. I'm just going to develop this scar tissue. How am I going to change this or change me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think part of that protective, defensive strategy, so to speak, for me was to go invisible in every way possible. And literally, people wouldn't see me. I would be standing there and people wouldn't see me. They'd walk right by me and say, "Where were you?" I was right there. So being able to get from the door to my bedroom without incident was a
Oh yeah.
success. And so I think that happened physically, it happened energetically, and it certainly happened with my voice, to just go into silence, to go into invisibility. It really was protective, and it really was a superpower for a very long time.
So is are your parents feeling anything that's happening? Does your mom say, because with children, I think sometimes you feel that something is happening. You may not know how to address it,
Yeah.
but something is happening that
hmm
they don't share.
Yeah. I mean, I think they were worried about me. There was just such a lack of ability to communicate. The point at which, when I was ready to tell my mom, and she wanted to know what was going on, and I said, and I think I was probably 12 or 13. I'm afraid to tell you, because if I tell you, you'll be really hurt. It will really hurt you. And she turned around and walked out of out of my room. So I had a good sense that she didn't have the capacity to really hold. And her history, interestingly, is that her mother died when she was 11, got diagnosed with cancer when she was 5. And so then she was schlepped off to an aunt and uncle. It wasn't a very good situation. Her father, the story was that her father had died when she was 2. Well, it turns out he didn't die. He left. He abandoned the family and went and married somebody else and had kids and a whole nother family. So in my adult life, I was in a bookstore, and as books do for me, they just jump off the shelf, especially the ones that are most important. And the book Motherless Daughters jumped off the shelf. And my wife lost her mother when she was just 8 years old. So I'm like, oh, she needs this book. But she wasn't home at the time, and I started reading it, and it was amazing how much it resonated for me, the missing pieces of having a mother who wasn't mothered, who didn't really know how to mother, and then the impact. So it was really like I got that intergenerational transfer of trauma in that regard of lack of attunement, not quite sure. I mean, the one thing my mom wanted was a loving family, like she really, so that's what's so heartbreaking is like the hearts were all in the right place. The desire was there. It was just
Oh, yeah.
a lot of missing capacity for sure.
And a different era. They're coming up.
Absolutely.
You don't talk about anything. I mean, that era.
Right.
I'm a little bit older than you. And we didn't talk. I'm a lot of bit older than you, but we didn't talk about that in our family. What nobody talked about incest or anything. Nobody,
Right.
not even your period.
Mhm.
It just wasn't a thing you talked about.
Exactly.
It's just a thing you had to learn. So, do you think your mother had any sense? And I asked mother more than father because do you think she had a sense and didn't want to go there, or she just didn't want to go there? Whatever.
That question that I asked, what she asked me, and then what I said to her, like, I don't want to tell you, I'm afraid because I don't want to hurt you. Um, it just spoke volumes that she walked away from that. And I don't think it was out of being malicious. I just really don't think that she had the capacity, like emotionally speaking, to really tolerate what might come because she had her own history for sure. And I think just energetically there was a resonance there that was unspoken. Uh, how conscious? I don't think very conscious, honestly.
What were what were some of the beliefs that you had to
Oh my goodness.
kind of transform or overcome or deal with, or what were some of the beliefs that you had to help heal about
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah. I would say the biggest one and that I'm still working on in some areas is the belief that I have to do it all by myself. That I really truly am all alone, and there is nobody who's going to help me. And I think that definitely comes from my experiences. And then beliefs around not being enough. And I think also, growing up, having a sexual abuse history, and then coming out to myself as a lesbian, like two taboos that have a sexual component, at least, at least. And there's so much, just so much silence, like being wrong. Like, I do not fit. I don't know how I got here. I don't fit. I don't fit in this family. I don't fit in this world. Like, there is not a place for me. So feeling very much an outsider. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. So when you came out, what did you say to your mom, or what did you do? How does that work?
Well, that's a story in itself. As a kid who had a neon sign abuse me, the coach, I was very athletic. Athletics and being working hard in school, academics really saved my life. Like, those were the things that just helped me so much in the survival in the day to day. And so as an athlete, the coach of one of my teams decided that it would be a really good idea to have a sexual relationship with me. And so we did. And that was kind of coming out. Like, that was kind of the rumor mill, just horrible, small town and a lot of gossip. And so those two things got conflated. like I didn't want to get in trouble for being a lesbian. So I'm like, well, I was sexually abused in the family. So I kind of threw that out there. So,
Oh,
so my,
sorry, you're saying that publicly. Oh, no, no, I was
with,
sexually abused. It wasn't, I didn't choose this.
it wasn't that I didn't choose it. Um,
No, I mean, when you were saying it to people.
this was what I was saying to my mom and my dad.
Oh, okay, okay.
So they were starting to question me about this relationship. And I wasn't ready to I just wasn't ready to deal with it. I didn't know what was going to happen. And so yeah, that in my wisdom, like try bait and switch, take your pick. This was what was happening, really. Um, so
Yeah,
so that was tough. I mean, that was just a tough time for
sure.
me. It was a tough time for them. And I didn't have a lot of like angst about coming out, honestly. But I had a lot of like left to my own devices and in my own not the abusive relationship, but finding a girlfriend my own age and kind of developing in that way was like, this is fine. It's the rest of the world that's really fucked up. So that was not that problematic, but there was this space of feeling something deeply, deeply is doesn't work, is wrong, doesn't fit. I don't fit. And it was on both of those levels of having been abused, but also then having this identity that obviously is not very accepted. So
Now, this is, I don't know, this is coming from, but having the identity, do you try to counteract that by saying, by dating guys also? Or because,
you
you
know,
know, that,
I did have a couple of boyfriends early in high school, and that was before really coming out. So
because you're small town
yeah.
and you've got, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
because you hear that story a lot, whether just to make sure, am
Hmm.
I who I am? Because we don't know the identity is. I mean, we're
Hmm.
young, you're in high school, you're just trying to figure stuff out. Because, I mean, we're becoming,
Hmm.
whatever we're becoming, and I'm still becoming. You're still, I don't think that ever ends, but
I
we're
don't think it ever
becoming.
ends. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that work through the high school now? You've dated the coach. I mean, does she get into trouble when the rumor mills happen?
I think she lost her job after I graduated. So I think that's what happened there. Um, but no, not like major trouble. Not really. Not like what would happen today at all. Yeah.
Do you think that, well, speaking for myself, but do you think that the trauma and the challenges were, gave you a purpose as you grew up? It's like it sent you in a direction. And I know we're going to talk about the bookstore because I know at some point you owned a bookstore.
Hmm.
I remember that you owned a bookstore. So, but do you think that when you connected with the trauma and who you are, and I'm an adult and this and that, and standing in your own, standing firm on your ground, do you think that directed you into the purpose, into what you're doing now, into your coaching and your transformational healing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think pretty early on, I think in high school, I really like I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to really help people at that level of deep healing, and that's what made sense. I actually became a social worker because it made more
Oh,
sense
right.
to.
Yeah.
I like the idea of changing the world rather than helping people adjust to a sick society, and that was more kind of a social work. It's more of a social work ethic, even though I actually do a lot of deep personal work. Um, but yeah, that feeling of I really want to help people not go through what I've gone through. And I really want to help people recover from the bad stuff that can happen. And when I was in training and in my first jobs, there was an understanding about the impact of trauma on the brain, but there was not an understanding at that time that you actually could recover, that the brain has the plasticity that it has, that you can create new neural pathways, that you can achieve health and wellness and you can like truly recover. And so it felt like kind of that, I mean, not quite a death sentence, but just like living in hell sentence, like, oh my gosh, my brain's been ruined and this is going to be challenging because it's hard. There was a lot of impact from what happened in terms of my lack of happiness, my, I would say, kind of a anxiety around taking risk. Even though I took a lot of risks, it was like I'm shaking in my boots always. So just very challenging and very isolating. So, so those, so to know now that none of that wasn't true. I mean, yes, trauma can have a really impactful negative impact on the brain, but there's healing. There's true deep level healing that can happen. That's what's so wonderful now.
How do we know, or how did you know, or how are you knowing that you're healed or transformed, or how do you know?
Yeah. So my first approaches were really kind of getting the ick out of my body. Like I had this sense like I could talk about this stuff until I'm blue in the face and I still feel horrible. It's really embodied. And I feel really fortunate that I found a methodology that's an ego state work, which is really working with parts of self that that probably kept me on the planet because that helped release some of the I call it the ick, like the really intense, painful physiology. I was able to start releasing. And then I did a period of the trauma processing EMDR, which stands for eye movement, eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing. And it's a way of unhooking really the bad stuff that happened. And so I stopped having ruminating about the stuff that happened or, replaying and wanting, trying to have a different outcome. It kind of like the past became more the past. And I had fewer, what I would say, trauma triggers.
Yeah. How
But
long
what,
does that take, actually? How long did that take you? Because we know all of these are not an overnight process. It's step by
yeah,
step by
yeah,
chipping away at it.
yeah. I mean, I think, for me, because it was a good decade of being abused and then a good childhood of not getting needs met. So it was a lot. There was a lot there. And I would say, 15 years, 20 years. I was in therapy regularly for a pretty long time, doing some pretty intense work there. But the one thing that I noticed that didn't really change was I was really reactive. Like like there was a little monster inside of me that would just get when I got triggered, it was like take no prisoners, which
Yeah.
was not great in my relationship and also really was hurtful for me because it's not like that's not really who I am. But I don't I don't like people who are invasive. I don't like this feeling of being maybe challenged in certain ways or being treated poorly, like whatever it might be. There was this reactivity, and that's when I started learning about the developmental needs meeting strategy, which is that approach of actually healing attachment wounds. That's when the reactivity began to resolve, which
Yeah.
was amazing. That was like getting a second lease on life.
So
It
what's a
was,
step in that? Like a healing attachment wounds. What
yeah.
what is like a
So,
first step in
mhm.
that?
So this process is based on the idea that when we get wounded as children and our brain gets activated into fight or flight, we can't do either one successfully. So we dissociate. That's the strategy, is to check out because we we can't run away, we can't fight as a young kid successfully. Like that's just not, it just doesn't work. And so what happens then in that, it's like the splitting occurs and then energetically in the body, that part gets kind of stuck with the painful emotions, with the negative beliefs, because children are meaning makers, that always making meaning of things, which is never helpful. That's where those limiting beliefs actually start. That's where they originate. And then kind of a recording of whatever it was that was going on, kind of the video of what was going on. So when we get triggered, that's what gets activated. And so if it was, and the trigger is what it gets activated, but it also amplifies our reaction. So if we didn't have the history that we had and something frustrated us, we just deal with the frustration with our most adult self, our capacities, would deal with it, have a conversation. But if we're getting triggered, then we might go into yelling and screaming or storming off, or whatever the reactive behavior might be. So this strategy is really about identifying resources, ideally based in a person's most adult caregiving self, who they've been a good caregiver for, a spiritual core kind of resource, and then creating a special safe place for these wounded child parts to kind of hang out and play and have fun. And then the process itself is to invite forward the parts that are connected to the trigger that the adult is having, help that part understand that she can connect to these resources, she can tell her story and get a lot of empathy and compassion and validation. And then she can begin to understand that she's in the present moment, that she's living in an adult body, and that she's been reacting to a harmless recording. And that breaks the trance. There's a trance that these parts have that the past is still happening. And that is what creates the problems that we have. And so when we break that trance and the part becomes more stable in understanding, like, oh, I don't have to go to work with Amy. I can go play in the, safe place, the special safe place with the resources. She can go deal with that stuff she likes to deal with. I don't have to show up for that. So there's this beginning understanding of these parts that have been getting reactive, that have been getting triggered, that there's no need for that anymore. And that's one phase of this work, which is called stabilization. But there's a couple more phases which include up to and include these parts actually getting all of their needs met by the resources.
So when can you start that process? At what age can?
Anytime. I don't work with children anymore. I used to work in foster care and worked with kids, but I just work with adults now. But I work with a lot of clinicians who work with kids. I train clinicians in this model, and it's fascinating to me how powerful, if there's a 16-year-old who's got a 10-year-old part, and that 10-year-old part can get the benefit of this work, then the 16-year-old can be more effective in whatever it is she needs to deal with. And she may still be in the family and in the tough situation, but if she's not getting triggered, if her little parts, younger parts aren't getting triggered, then she's going to do better.
So you're talking about you wouldn't start them until they're teenagers, where they can understand.
I actually have I have clinicians who are working with really much younger kids. And what they might do is they'll use the sand tray technique for building the resource team in the safe place. And it's going to be, the work's going to be adjusted for little kids. But yeah, there's elements of it that people are using, which I'm blown away by, because it's really powerful.
Now, is this used? Oh, the clinicians are using it. Is this applied, like in the foster care system? Are they using that, or
Not that I know of. I wish they were. I wish. What I would love to see happen is this kind of work being used, especially for parents that are at risk of losing their kids into state custody, because so much of that, there might be abuse happening, but it's more the emotional neglect and just not having capacity. And what's really powerful about this approach is that you learn you learn what attachment means and what it feels like. And it's really creating new neural pathways that basically the brain then responds like, oh, I got my needs met. It's very fascinating how this all works.
Yeah. I would imagine that in the foster care system, it would be difficult to find people who are trained in that. You would have to train the I don't know, social workers, or they would have to be
Mhm.
clinicians.
Well, social workers are clinicians. I mean, can be
Oh, okay.
clinicians.
Okay.
Yeah. So whoever's doing the clinical work with the kids would have to
Be
want to
trained.
want to train in this work. And
Yeah, because it's certainly needed. When I hear you say that, even though we haven't gone, you've gone into depth about it, but I think about all the kids who are youth aging out of care who could, okay, become an adult now. We're going to give you this stipend. Go out there and deal. You may have been abused. You may have been, put on your big girl, big boy shoes and get out there. And you haven't even dealt with the childhood trauma of some people. I mean, I met some people who have been in so many different homes. They have no sense of that. They're just looking for home.
Mhm.
So when you age out, home can look like that person who abuses you again.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and interesting you bring that up because in my relationship work, that's part of what I'm working with couples. Like home looks like what you're used to. Home looks like what love looks like is what you receive. So love can be cold and distant. Love can be, love can look like a lot of different things. And what I find with couples is when they're really stuck and they can't use the tools of good communication or whatever it might be, uh, it's based in attachment wounding. That's really at the basis. Like it's kind of the more attachment wounding there is, the more challenges people are going to have in their lives and especially in relationship. They might be very successful in their job, but they don't have great relationships, maybe with, coworkers or people that report to them or whatever.
Or successful in their jobs and have that great armor that goes out. Yes, because I'm speaking again about myself, but you have that armor that people think everything is just, I want to say Jim Dandy, but you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Everything
Yeah.
is connected. You have relationships. You show up the way you kind of want to have things, but then you go home and you can't be that person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You just you because it's not, it is real, but it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's that other part of you, like you're talking about, going back to bringing up the young you and having the conversation with the young you and where you are, and saying, oh yeah, let that Amy go out, let adult Amy go out to play. But when I hear that, Amy, there's another part of me that goes, does that lead to split personality?
Yeah. Actually, what's really phenomenal is it does not. It doesn't lead to dependence on the therapist because you're working with resources. It's kind of like before we got on recording, you were doing a little sisters are doing it for themselves. It's like the person is doing it for themselves. It's the most empowering level of healing when it comes to healing that I've ever experienced. And that that is because it's these aspects of who you've already grown to be as a competent caregiver that are then turned inward and are taking care of those little parts or whatever age. So that it actually leads to more interconnection, more stability, rather than a greater level of splitting. And so what happens, the difference between, say, somebody who has a true dissociative identity disorder diagnosis and somebody who doesn't, but there's a lot of dissociation, is that the person who doesn't have that diagnosis, they actually may really integrate these parts. We're just not talking about parts anymore because they've actually truly grown to meet their full potential. They've really integrated with the adult self in so many ways. Whereas somebody who has DID can become a lot more stable, and then the whole system is interacting and working together better, but they may not integrate in the same way. Integration's not the point, it's not even the goal, it's just something that happens. It's kind of like a really positive side benefit